IVM.
I don't know a single entrepreneur who hasn't had a day of stress and anxiety. It's just the nature of running your own business. And the current COVID situation has only exacerbated that. So I thought it would be helpful to get some tips on how best to deal with this. And who better than my next guest, Shayamal Vallabhjee. Shayamal is a South African-born sports scientist with a master's in psychology. He's worked as a high-performance coach at the cutting edge of professional sport for 2 decades. Shayamal lived as a monk at the Hare Krishna temple and now passionately combines evidence-based science and psychology with ancient spiritual practices to help his clients achieve peak performance and flow. He's worked with the South African and Indian cricket and Davis Cup teams, Kings XI Punjab, St. Lucia Stars, Indian Olympic Association, ATP Tour, Kenyan Athletics, and the list goes on. Shayamal is the author of 3 books, a TEDx speaker, and Men's Health Trainer of the Year, and a passionate ultramarathoner. Wow, Shayamal, I'm feeling very unfit right now. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
So, Shayamal, with all that's been happening in the past few months around the world with COVID, it feels like, one big science fiction blockbuster movie. Things have happened beyond our imaginations and our worst nightmares and fears have come true. A lot of people are feeling that they are losing control, which is causing them, obviously, a lot of stress and anxiety. How does one make sense of all that's going on? How can one let go of wanting to have control?
So, you're right. Everything does feel like a science fiction movie right now. And that's because there's a good chance that every single person alive on the planet has never gone through any of this before. Right. And if you have a look at it, Krishnamurti beautifully says that the fear is linked to our unknown. So as long as something is unknown, fear will be present. And every single day that we navigate down this line, we navigate deeper into the unknown, which is why physiologically our fear is really manifesting and it's bringing about a hormone and a chemical imbalance in the body. So the first thing we should do and let everyone know is that the fear is real, but the fear is also normal. Okay. And the fear is really linked to your unknown. Okay. No one can with 100% certainty tell you what is going to happen. No one's going to tell you that in October we're going to be okay or January you're going to be okay. No one's going to tell you that your job's secure or your company is stable. No one has that sort of clarity to give you, which means that even the people you're seeking information from are as fearful as you are. Now the question is, we've probably heard a saying very often in the world, which is saying control the controllables. Okay. And the controllables is that which is within you. The uncontrollables are those elements that are without you or beyond yourself. Okay. And at a time like this, I think the only way to make sense of everything is to understand what is it that I can control within my entire psychology and within my entire system that allows me to bring myself to a point of stability right now. These variables on the external are constantly going to be changing. And I always speak about this with respect to even emotional healing, with respect to healing from trauma. If you are looking for external validation, if you're looking for someone to give you closure, if you're looking for someone to find a solution for you, then you are literally sacrificing all of your healing potential, all of your happiness, all of your potential. You're leaving it at the mercy of someone else. So what people need to do right now is, I'm going to assume that the people who are listening to our podcast operate from a very rational mind. So we will operate from a lens of what's called cognitive behavioral therapy, which means that our belief system forces us to act in a certain manner, right? Which means if you have an irrational belief system, you will act in an irrational manner. But because they are of a rational mind, we can shift that belief system. Okay, how would you shift that belief system for a person in this current day and age? What you do is you simply get them to understand what is it that we're actually fearful of. Stoicism speaks of living your fear. So I generally encourage people, take a piece of paper and pen, right? Write down single thing that you're scared of, right? If you're scared of losing your job, write it down there. Then what will manifest as a result of that? Right. What can you do as a result of these things manifesting? What is the probability of these things actually manifesting? You see, by putting clarity around your belief systems, you can shift an irrational belief system to a rational belief system. Maybe 100% of it won't disappear. But even if one thing comes off that list, you'll be able to manage your cortisol levels and your stress levels better. So for everyone right now, what it is, it's about really being mindful enough and present of mind enough to be able to interpret the variables within my control and without my control to be able to understand how I can shift a belief system. This is the only way we can really get the rational mind to process enough with respect to what we need to do.
Right. So, you talked so much about what's without us, right? So what's outside in our environment. I think one of the things that's kind of feeding this sense of or lack of control and this fear is an information overload, right? So we're surrounded by news and, we tend to consume, and there's this mindless scrolling of, social media, and it seems like it's doing more harm than good. But people don't realize it because it's kind of just become a way of life. How do we deal with this sort of digital spam coming our way? And, could this be a source of anxiety to many of us? And one of the things that potentially we could manage better.
Absolutely. Information is without a doubt a source of distraction. And information overload to you will do a few things. One is it'll form a distraction in your life, which means that you won't be able to focus on what you need to because you're constantly distracted by information around you. The second thing is it will inundate you with so much information you won't be able to process what is happening. Okay. The third thing that it does is it'll create a sense of a FOMO, a fear of missing out, because there's so much happening around you. Even when the markets are turning, even when opportunities are presented, you'll still have this FOMO existing in the sense that, am I not consuming enough? Am I not leveraging enough? Am I not trying enough? And the fourth thing that information overload will do to you is it'll put you in an echo chamber, which means that an artificial intelligence really exasperates this problem. So whatever you are thinking, whatever you are talking about, whatever you are typing in Google creates an echo chamber, which means that artificial intelligence bounces back that same information to validate your thought process. And that's the biggest problem with artificial intelligence, is that a single thought of yours gets bombarded back to you so many times that you think that perception of reality is actually reality.
Reality, yeah.
Right. So you're right. Information is currently is currently affecting your consciousness in many shapes and forms. And what is it doing? Because there's a saying in the media is that if it bleeds, it reads, which means that, they are solely invested in giving you negative news because negative news sells faster. Right. So that's how all media, all journalism helps. Now, the problem is that every time you read negative news and you slip into an echo chamber, right, you get stressed, you get anxious, you have this levels of uncertainty. This is driving up your cortisol levels in your body, which is dropping your immunity. So the mere consumption of information at this current day and age is impacting your health more than you actually realize. It's impacting your psychology, it's impacting your physiology, it's impacting your neurobiology, it's impacting every single thing under the thing. And you have to really you need to have the presence of mind to really decompress and remove yourself from this. I call this media fasting. I tell people at least 2 to 3 days in a week, don't look at social media, don't read any news. You need to give your neurochemical system and your neurological system a chance to really rest. Otherwise, you're bombarded by so much of information that on a subconscious level, there's always anxiety. So you're right. This amount of information is definitely disastrous to what's happening to our physiology and our biochemistry. And it's really important for us to now start tapering down and away from it.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting that, I've never really thought of it as in terms of the chemical impact it's having to our bodies and therefore, to our sort of mindset generally. But I mean, what we talked about earlier. I think the situation of not having control over our life entirely. I mean, of course, it's exacerbated right now in the current times. But we've all faced setbacks in our life and in our careers. Whether it's in our case, a business shutting down, for example, or I see that even now. Like I said, it's exaggerated now more so because, you have more, for example, in my industry, restaurants shutting down. And these are businesses that, people have put their heart and soul into. It's something so personal. How do you cope with sort of professional setbacks? Because it's also a source of, your financial existence, and that can be a very real sort of problem. So how does someone actually, I understand what you meant earlier about identifying what that fear is and, what the worst case scenario is. And once you've done that and you still feel, it's not a sort of comfortable situation for you, how do you sort of cope with that?
Let's pull it back a little bit. If you look at the world of entrepreneurship, I've been fortunate to have been an entrepreneur. I built a business like Heal, scaled it, and exited it as well. And if you notice, if you read entrepreneurship books, you look at even big entrepreneurs in India and even globally in Silicon Valley, they always tend to find that the psychology of starting something and the psychology of scaling something is completely different, isn't it? So they look at an entrepreneur, and an entrepreneur starts a great idea, builds it up, but when they're coming in to invest $50 million, and they're looking for a new CEO who's got the mindset of scale. Okay, and I was very fascinated by this concept. Okay, what is it that new CEO is going to do that the founder can't do? And really and truly, it's the ability to take risk in a new venture. You see, what happens with entrepreneurs is that we are too emotionally attached to our concept and our idea. Okay, and that's the biggest problem. That's the biggest problem in your growth. That's the biggest problem that you're facing right now. Okay, and the secret to really scaling anything or growing anything is to create it, but also to disassociate it from it. Okay, because that's when you're able to take the best decisions around it. So for those people who are professionally being impacted right now, I always tell people that, this business that you currently have is going to be one of many things that you do, because that's just what an entrepreneur does. He has multiple lenses that is on at the same time. You cannot be emotionally invested in every single idea because a large percentage of them will not succeed.
Right.
90% of the time they will fail, one will take it. Now, the problem is if that you're emotionally invested in every single one and you're holding on to it, then you're going to be stunting its growth. You're going to be stunting any possibility of it flying. And more especially, you need to be able to have a clinical mind with respect to when to cut the cord. Okay. The problem with entrepreneurs right now, and perhaps in restaurants or in any business, is that, the writing has been on the wall for a long time. You're just holding on for longer than you should be. You understand? And the ramifications of holding on will only be felt 18 months later after that business is even gone. Okay, you'll still be sitting with the debt. You'll still be sitting with the legal problems. You'll still be sitting with VCs on your head, all sorts of things like that. So what you need to really cultivate is, and spirituality speaks of this. Spirituality speaks of work in service, but disassociate from the expectation of it. Listen, now if you all approach everything with the spiritual lens of disassociation, we'll be able to give all our energy towards it. Okay, and if it flies, it flies, and if it doesn't fly, we move on. That's the secret right now.
So it's the ability of also letting go when the time's right. I mean, I think that's what's very hard for a lot of us entrepreneurs. But I mean, tell me, is it different how we should be looking at coping with a professional versus a personal setback? So, for example, in the case of losing a relationship or just personal setbacks of any death or anything. So is that a different approach than when it comes to sort of personal matters?
The difference between professional and personal is only in the narrative. Okay. Physiologically, your brain is not distinguishing that, okay, I've lost my business or I've lost my lover. The physiological and the neurochemical changes in the body are exactly the same. If there's stress, it's responding in the same way. If there's anxiety, it's responding the same. If there's joy, it's even responding in the same way. Only in your conscious, rational mind is the narrative seeming slightly different. Now, and this is where mindfulness really comes into play. You see, what most people are unable to do is they're unable to peel away the layers that look at the physiology behind the narrative. Okay, right now, that's why you think, okay, you know what? I am fighting with my co-founder as an entrepreneur, and then I am fighting with my partner, my wife, my husband, my lover at home, and these are completely separate. No, they're not completely separate. The subconscious schema that's driving that pattern is the same subconscious schema that's driving another pattern. Only you refuse to see the link between the two. which is why it looks like professional versus personal.
Right.
But the narratives, don't get lost in the narratives. That's the secret to life. I always tell people who want to get fit and get healthy, I said, right now, you are inundated by options. You can do Zumba, you can do CrossFit, you can do yoga, you can do pole dance, you can do Pilates, you can become a runner, you can become a cyclist, you can start
And there's
rowing,
so many diets as well, right? That they're like
so many diets. All right. You could spend an entire lifetime deciding what to do and not do anything, as opposed to just pick any one of them and stay disciplined with it, and you'll become the person you want to be. Okay. So this is what we really need to do. And that's why I keep bouncing back to mindfulness. Only a person who's cultivating mindfulness, who has an emotional presence of mind in every single moment, will be able to peel away the layers to understand what are these unconscious threads that are really linking everything together. Without that, you're going to be at the mercy of the narrative and at the mercy of the emotion linked to that narrative.
Right. I want to come back to mindfulness in a bit and, talk about that a bit more. But, how does one actually sort of regain confidence after a failure? So I've seen, people tend to deal with setbacks and challenges. Some people deal with them better than others. So how does one actually get that confidence back again?
Confidence is just a byproduct of trying. Confidence is a byproduct of success. And success is a byproduct of execution. In the world of sport, we have a beautiful phrase. We say, the more you try, the more you're going to fail. The more you fail, the more comfortable you're going to become with failure. The more comfortable you will become with failure, the more you will try. The more you will try, the more successful you will be. You understand? Bruce Lee says it beautifully, that if you want to be successful, you have to befriend failure. You've looked at all of these thousands of quotes. Even Thomas Edison said that. He says, he had 2,000 patents. He got famous for one. Right? Every time he failed, he said, I didn't think of it as a failure. I found a new way in which it would not work. Michael Jordan says, we fall down 8 times, we wake up 9 times. It goes on and on. Everyone's telling you what? They're telling you befriend failure. And I think this is the beautiful thing that I've learned from the world of professional sport. If I ask a professional athlete, how many times have you failed in a single practice session? He cannot even give you an answer. Okay, he cannot give you an answer. He's failed that many times in a session, sometimes 100, 150 times. He's failed so much that he doesn't even consider it a failure. He doesn't even think about it. He just gets up and goes. You see the people in every other field of life, if something doesn't go right, it's right at the front and center of their mind. And remember, your neurobiology is trying to bring threats to the forefront of your mind. That's the role of the amygdala in the brain, is to perceive threats. And if you're not failing consistently and often enough, then that one threat is going to be like a massive alarm bell that's going off all the time. The only way to really diminish that is to make that effort and get over that as quick as possible. That's the secret to success. Make failure your friend, and you will never, ever worry about if success will come. It's just a matter of when.
Right. Yeah, you won't be afraid of it. You won't be afraid of the failure anymore, and you'll sort of have the confidence to try something out and take that chance. Yeah. But in your profession of working with people primarily from the sports field, how do you help them sort of rewire their mindset to cope with setbacks?
So, there's an interesting thing. It's called imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is the self-doubt that exists in every single mind. And I can tell you this with confidence, that there isn't a single person on earth who wakes up, a successful person. And I'm talking of, you can look at the Ratan Tatas and the Ronnie Screwwalas and the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Warren Buffetts and you name them, and the Blake McCoskeys and whoever. They wake up every single day and there's an element of doubt. Even a Usain Bolt, before the gun goes off at the Olympic final, is doubting himself. Right? That doubt is what keeps you sharp. Okay, the doubt is never going to ever disappear in life. Doubt keeps you sharp. Doubt makes you focused on what you need to do. Doubt also tells you that I've got something invested in this. This is why the result of this matters. Right? So I remind my athletes this. I remind my athletes that doubt is not something to fear. Doubt is something to embrace. The only person who's doubtful is the person who's invested so much of time, energy, money, and resources behind the result that that result matters. If you're now doubtful, then you've not ticked all the boxes to even expect a result. So I reframe it in my athlete's mind. then I also subconsciously reprogram their mind. I make sure that we constantly end every single session on a high. I never end any session where my athlete's completely distraught. I never end a session on a failure. I always end a session on a positive note because I'm trying to re-engage the muscle memory around success. I also constantly, every time I'm talking to them, the narrative is about reminding them all of the good things that they've done. So I'm saying, okay, we need to do this, but man, you hit 100 balls perfectly well. I'll remind them of, you remember when we were playing in this tournament and you approached the green with this 7th iron and it was into a headwind, but we were 1 inch from the hole. I constantly bring their successes back to their mind because remember, confidence is cyclic. It's like winning. In the world of sport, I keep telling her, everybody who's come and told me that participation is important has never won anything in their life. A person who has won will tell you winning is important. Okay, because winning is just a habit. When you win, you want to win at everything. I can tell you right now, you take a Michael Jordan at this age.
I just watched that. I was just going to bring that up, actually. I just watched The Last Dance, and that's exactly him. He couldn't think beyond winning. Like, it was just something that nothing less than winning was acceptable to him.
Gauri, I can give you, I'll put $100 down and tell you now that if you bring Michael Jordan and Roger Federer and Rafa Nadal into your kitchen, even if they know nothing about cooking, they will back themselves to bake better than you in 7 days. Right? Because we refuse to accept we are anything except the best.
Right.
That's not because we're arrogant. It's because being the best and winning is such an ingrained part of our DNA that it ruminates in every element of our life.
Yeah.
It's
it fuels everything you do, essentially.
Yeah, people I remember once my girlfriend was telling me, you flirt with everyone. I said, this is true. This is true because it's not about, I'm not flirting with someone. It's part of who I am. It's how I communicate. Winning is part of who you are. This thing's part of you. It's when something is a part of you, it ruminates in all elements of your life,
sure.
Which is why we come back to what you said. You cannot split professional from personal. You are the same person that's operating in two ecosystems.
Yeah. No, that makes complete sense. Coming back to sort of mindfulness, which, you mentioned earlier, tell us, what is mindfulness? We hear this a lot. We hear this word a lot. And I've heard it, being even mentioned in my daughter's school. What is mindfulness actually?
Mindfulness is just the process by which we're able to still the mind, where you're able to hold your thought on a particular emotion, thought, or feeling, where you're able to just focus and have an emotional presence of mind, which means that when we're having this conversation, the mind is not racing off to 10 other things that you need to do. When you're chatting to one of your children or one of your siblings, you're not thinking of 10 other things. When you're watching TV, you're not playing on your phone. Mindfulness is having the presence of mind to be in that moment at that particular time. That's what mindfulness is. And it's only when you become mindful that you are aware of every thought, emotion, and feeling. If you're not mindful, then you are at the mercy of what we call subconscious programs, which means you are reacting in a manner that is unbecoming of you, or that was installed program from your early childhood or from an element of your life that conditioned you. So mindfulness is just really and truly its presence of mind.
Right. And I mean, it couldn't be more sort of important today than ever before. But, what are some of the sort of ways that one could kind of learn the art of being calm and mindful and having that presence of mind? How does one sort of train oneself and, to be conscious of that?
Yeah, so there are many things you can do. I break it up. I have tons of exercises where I give people, you can start a simple one. The obvious ones that I tell everyone is, I said, just focus on your breath. When you're sitting down in solitude for 4 to 5 minutes, just start focusing on how the air is going in through your nose, out through your mouth, or in through your nose, out through your nose. Then start drawing your awareness to the temperature changes of the air coming in versus the air going out. What are you feeling? Look at the rise of your chest to your belly. Try to draw your awareness to how your heart's beating or any tingling feelings on your body that are arising from this. Just focus all your energy and your awareness on that single process. So that's breath work. You can do mindful eating, where For example, such a beautiful, simple exercise, which is actually fantastic for health, is mindful eating is making sure that you chew every bite of food 20 times. So every time you put food in your mouth, just chew it 20 times. It's great for your digestion. But if you're not mindful, you will never chew it 20 times. You'll chew it 5 times and then swallow it. You chew it 10 times and so. So mindful eating is just, so what you're trying to do is these simple things that you bring into your daily life ensures that you cultivate your energy in the here and the now. If I'm having a conversation, take your phone, put your phone aside. It doesn't need to be there. There's a beautiful research study that shows that the mere fact that your phone is on the same table that you're eating dinner with someone, even if it's turned upside down, it's a source of distraction. We've mapped it to see how many times, even if the phone's not going off, right, how many times you're looking at it. And I think this culture was really perpetuated, this distraction was perpetuated through that BlackBerry era, where that red light constantly, everyone was just looking for a red light everywhere they went, and that's what happened. It started there, and it's just we've been inundated with it. It's that dopamine hit that Facebook has become $1 billion industry on.
Yeah. No, and I think a lot of our a lot of what we interact with on a day-to-day basis kind of feeds on that, right? Like with your notifications and everything kind of coming your way, and there's this constant stimuli from everywhere, and just this thing of there's so many sort of things going on around you, and you just it's very hard to consciously do this, I think, especially today, but I guess it's even more so important for that reason.
Yeah, Gauri, it's not really difficult. I tell people mindfulness is not a difficult thing. It's just that you're a master of distraction.
Right. No, that's what I mean, that it's actually it is sort of a simple thing to do, but it's hard to do with everything going on around you, and consciously just remember to do it, to just sort of stop and not have 10 things going on and feel like, oh, I'm the king of multitasking and I can be doing, all of these things. And it's sort of what I want to talk about. It sort of flows with what I want to talk about next, which is balance as well. That you talk a lot about balance, and I want you to explain what that means. But I think from my perspective, as a working mother, and I haven't never been anything other than a woman, so I don't know, what it's like to not be a mother or, a wife. But I do know that, having a child, a husband, work, all of these things sort of happening all at once, you almost sometimes make an excuse to say that you can't sit down and like think about things, and you just kind of keep going, and you're kind of going at it like a hamster almost, because that's life, and you just suck it up and deal with it. And I what you're saying actually makes so much more sense, but you kind of have to make a conscious effort to do it, is sort of how it feels right now. What do you how do you explain this idea of balance? And I'm guessing that's sort of tied a lot to do with mindfulness as well.
Yes, it is. And firstly, everything needs a conscious effort.
Yeah.
Conscious mind is the gateway to reprogramming everything and anything in your life. You see, when something moves from your conscious mind into your subconscious mind, it operates in a fast and automatic way, which means you don't have to think about it. Okay. If you don't have to think about it, and you don't think about it at all, okay, then that becomes your new normal, and that will manifest as your destiny. Okay, remember that. So for example, if you've come from a really destitute background where you've not had anything, and you grew up in a mindset of not taking risks, for example, you want to really conserve, right? If you do not consciously challenge that thought process, okay, to reiterate that and reprogram that, you will never take a risk. And if you never take a risk, then living a life in that ecosystem will manifest as destiny. It's not your destiny. It's your subconscious program that you refuse to challenge. Mm. So when we say conscious mind and challenge everything needs to be challenged is the first thing that everyone needs to understand. If you do not challenge something, then that is your fate and that is your destiny. Okay. With respect to the concept of balance, when I started looking at it and understanding it, nothing in my life was a resemblance of balance. I work with terminally ill patients who have got days or weeks to live, some hours. I work with professional athletes who are the top 1% in the world. Okay. I run ultra marathons. When I started my running journey, I wasn't quite happy in running the 10K and 20K. I started running 50, 75, 100K races. Right? I pushed myself on that. When I needed to understand my body and understand my mind, I didn't go for counseling. I moved into a temple. I keep laughing. I said once, to get away from a relationship, I even moved out of a country, So everything in my life is an extreme. But what fascinated me was this word balance is used by every single person every day. So I asked people, I said, what is your definition of balance? What are you looking for? And I realized something, that people are confusing the word balance with symmetry. Okay, symmetry is when things are equal and opposite. Newton's third law, they're perfectly symmetrical. And that's what we expect balance to be like. Because when you talk of balance, and the first image that comes into your mind's eye is probably a scale or a seesaw tipping. So you have two things, and if those two things are looking equal and opposite, then they'll be balanced. That is the biggest myth around the concept of balance that exists. And I thought, how do I break this myth? And I thought the only way for me to truly understand balance is to go into where balance exists in its most natural, rudimentary form. So I looked at nature, I looked at biology, I looked at cosmology, I looked at astrology, I looked at neurobiology, and I looked at how does balance exist in these ecosystems. And I found if you take nature, the way plants unfurl is based on what we call the golden ratio. Okay, the golden ratio is a formula that shows how things really manifest into each other and grow out of each other. The golden ratio is the perfect example of balance in nature, but it is not symmetrical at all. It's asymmetrical. Then I looked at our own human physiology. You look at the amount of insulin secreted in your body to bring your blood sugar back into balance. It's not 1:1. It's nowhere close to 1:1. It's a drop of insulin that can bring all your blood sugar levels back down. Once again, there's asymmetry there. If you look at, in the book, I talk of wolves in the jungle or wolves in a forest and a rabbit population. It would take 1,000 wolves to keep a rabbit population of 25,000 in check. Okay, right. It's not 1:1. It's not one wolf for one rabbit. So everywhere you look in nature, asymmetry is a representation of balance. So that's the first point that I bring across to everyone. I said, if you're looking for symmetry, you're going down the wrong road. The second thing I tell people is that everywhere in life, balance is fluid and dynamic. It's changing every second of the day. So you need to embrace it as a changing equilibrium. Right? So look at it like that. Understand that today, balance for me on a Sunday may be 4 hours with my kids. But balance on Monday is 30 minutes. Understand that. Don't keep it so static. Understand that during COVID times, at the start of COVID, when we are trying to embrace the uncertainty and re-engineer our business, balance meant 14 hours at work or at my desk. Now that I've understand and I've put the systems in place, balance is 4 hours.
Right.
It's changing. Right. And then the third element of it is everything balances on a central point. Okay. And the integrity of the central point is everything. So I give an example. If I give you a metal cube and I ask you to balance something on top, anyone will be able to balance it, right? If I give you a single nail and I ask you to balance something on top with a little bit more difficulty, you'll probably get it into balance. If I give you a tiny water balloon and I ask you to balance something on top, the chances or the probability of getting that right is very slim. The only thing that's changed in these three equations is the integrity of the central point upon which you're balancing things. In your life, that central point is you. And your integrity is defined by how well do you know yourself? How well do you know your strengths? How well do you understand your core values? How well do you understand your subconscious programming? How well are you able to set your personal emotional boundaries? How well are you able to communicate? How well are you able to understand your purpose? The more you know yourself, the greater your integrity is defined. The greater your integrity is defined, the greater the probability of bringing your life into balance. Right? So balance for me is asymmetrical, fluid and dynamic, and the integrity of the fulcrum is the most important thing. So that's the definition of balance that I try to bring to the forefront of everyone.
But what you mentioned earlier about, what you just mentioned about knowing yourself well, that's very hard, actually. Is that something that, are there sort of some disciplines almost that, people sort of don't think about these things in their day-to-day life. So, are there some disciplines that one can, inculcate to just, like you said, be more conscious of whether it's, our actions, our thoughts, finding balance, mindfulness, just some disciplines that, one can have every, in our day-to-day lives?
Absolutely. You've hit the nail on the head. Yes, it is exceptionally difficult to understand yourself. The thing is that we don't have any skin in the game in knowing ourselves, which is why we've not walked down that road. You wouldn't believe this. Knowing yourself is actually easier than learning how to bake a cake. The thing is that you have some skin in the game in learning how to bake. You just don't have any skin in the game in this. And the other problem is we're inundated by information that's really surface level. So I've read, when I was writing a book on how to fall in love with yourself, is my first chapter in Greed, Believe, Balance. As I'm doing my research, everyone's talking about retail therapy and spoiling yourself. And okay, I'm like, that is so surface level, that's so superfluous. Surely the art and science of falling in love with yourself runs deeper than this. And as I started peeling away the layers and I looked at philosophy from the Greeks and Romans and great philosophers talk about values and virtue system. Most people don't even know what their virtue system or value system is. And that is the thread that holds your entire world and your entire life together. For example, if you're in a relationship with someone and that relationship ends, it will end because a core value has been eroded. If, for example, loyalty or transparency or honesty is an important value system for you, right? If a person breaks that value system, that relationship is done, right? It's an invisible thread that's doing it. Now, that relationship in a personal setting, that value of honesty is the same value that would break in a business setting as well. Oh. The problem is people don't even know what they value.
They haven't identified.
They haven't identified what their value system. So everything is operating by chance right now. And this is what we need to change. There's tons of exercises that talk about learning what your values are, learning what your virtues are. I help people break this down to understand it. Then I help them connect it to everyone around them to understand how we can deepen these emotional connections so that these value systems become really strong ropes and as opposed to flimsy threads that are holding us together. And you're right. Everything is difficult. It's not supposed to be easy. Right? It requires a little bit of work. It requires your conscious attention and your conscious awareness. But the truth is that if you don't do this, you are at the mercy of so many variables that are beyond your control. Whereas just a small investment of time strengthens the integrity of who you are, and everything in your life really comes into balance.
Yeah, no, makes sense. I want to touch upon a few other areas which I know you've spoken about, which contribute to having a more holistic lifestyle. So obviously of personal interest to me as well, food. How important does food play a role in living a natural, positive, and balanced life?
So food is probably more integral than we've ever realized at this day and age. Firstly, because you are a byproduct of the 4 driving chemicals in your brain: acetylcholine, GABA, serotonin, dopamine. These hormones are brought in and out of balance by the food you consume, right? And how they get into your system. So, for example, if you're eating a lot of gluten, you are now perforating your gut lining, right? If you're eating a lot of lactose, you're creating a mucus around the gut lining, which is then either increasing the absorption or decreasing the absorption of nutrients into your blood system. Now, the pesticides in our food, the xenoestrogens from the plastics of how you're consuming, the environmental toxins, these things can leach into your bloodstream through the foods that you consume, and they bypass what's called your blood-brain barrier, which is a capillary layer between the brain and the cranium. When they leach in through that, they affect the balance of these hormones. So your food is directly proportional to how you're perceiving the world around you. Right. So when I talk about it, I'm not someone who tells someone eat proteins, eat fats, eat carbs. Yes, I do go into diets. I do talk about how to detoxify the body, how to reduce inflammation and control your glycemic variability. But what I'm trying to make people more aware is that if you're not consciously making healthy choices in your life around what you consume, then you are sacrificing, you're at the mercy of the food you eat in more ways than you'll ever realize. Right? So this is what I'm generally telling people. There are a lot of nutritionists and dietitians who will tell you what to eat. Now, all I'm trying to do is make you aware of the fact that if you don't make the right choices, and if you don't eat clean food, and if you don't eat quality food, okay, then the ramification of that single meal goes way beyond just eating that meal.
It's sorry, I just have to say this, that I'm so, I'm hearing you so clearly, because I've actually just started a diet, so to speak, where I haven't, I'm cutting back on the sugar intake, that, my work is such that I'm surrounded by sugar and breads and, things, and all the things that aren't good for me in large quantities. And, this thing of almost being at the mercy of what you eat is so true, because you're constantly giving into these cravings. And I'm just going through this process where I'm really trying to discipline myself, and, where I'll make a conscious choice to eat something rather than, my body can't handle it and I just need this and I need this now. And it's not something that I want to do, or, I need it and I'm responding to that, as opposed to, and it's an internal thing. I can feel it. Like I can feel a change in my body. But where I will choose to eat something, and find a little bit more, sort of, just discipline. And I guess, for want of a better word, this balance where you're not constantly just giving into these cravings, which I'm sure are, it's a mental thing as well, of, how you don't really have control over what you're eating.
No, but you've hit the nail on the head, in the sense that, our lack of knowledge, our ignorance around how we consume and how it impacts us is really been the plague that's perforated through the entire community, throughout the entire world, throughout the entire humanity. And what's the scary thing is, people have been reading my book and they come back and they're saying, this is amazing. I'm saying there's nothing amazing there. The research I'm giving you goes back to 324 BC. I don't even own it. All I've done is assimilated it in a manner that makes it more easier for you to understand. But it's not my research. And like the work of the impact of consciousness on food, beautiful book by Masaru Emoto, who speaks on the ability to use your consciousness to change your cell biology. Even Bruce Lipton speaks about this. And he did an example with water, and then he replicated it with plants, where just speaking consciously to plants helped that plant flourish, and speaking negatively to a plant killed it in 7 days. Speaking lovingly to a glass of water and then freezing that and removing a slice of that water and looking at it under a microscope, it had perfectly, beautifully symmetrical, healthy cells. And then there was another glass where he spoke violently and aggressively to it. And then he froze it and took a sliver and looked at it. And the entire cell structure was completely denatured. Our consciousness, we are cells, we are water. Everything around us has a consciousness. Our consciousness impacts every single thing around it, which is why, people ask me, are you a vegan? Do you promote veganism? I said, you know what? I am a vegan. I don't promote anything, but I do try to tell people to be consciously aware of the quality of food. And if you are consciously consuming meat from animals that are being tortured, then you leave the meat. You're absorbing that consciousness.
Right.
We have to understand that we're a byproduct of an accumulated consciousness around us.
Yeah.
And when you become mindful, you start making these decisions that help you think better, and you'll feel it. One of the easiest ways, which we've seen, Ayurveda speaks about it, and you can do a simple example. You just eat spicy food, and you'll notice that 5 minutes or 10 minutes later, you're really agitated. There's a good chance you'll scream at someone, right? Isn't they telling you this? They've told you that, if you increase your core body temperature through the foods you eat, then you're not going to have control over your vocabulary and your thoughts.
Right. So, I mean, so it comes back to that mindfulness of, what you're consuming and how it's impacting you. What about the environment? What role does our external environment contribute to optimizing to or adding to fulfilling our life?
Your environment is everything. And I keep telling people, I said everyone goes out there and set goals for life. They set a 6-month goal or a 1-month goal or a 6-week goal or whatever it is. And I said, not a single person who I've met sets a goal and then reorientates their environment to make sure that it's supporting your growth and development towards that goal. So by you not doing that, your environment is then providing a distraction for you. For example, I'll give you a sleep example this time. People who have had sleeping problems and a large percentage of our country struggle to fall asleep in the night. Now, there's tons of things you can do to your room to really promote that sleep. You can switch your curtains to blackout blinds. You can cover all those tiny LED lights which impact the melatonin production. You can switch your yellow lamp to red lights in the night, which increases the production. You can stop wearing restrictive clothing. You can keep your AC temperature to 19 to 20 degrees, which is optimal for sleep. You can start using a weighted blanket. You can remove your restrictive clothes when you're sleeping at night. You can do a pillow analysis. You can keep a dehumidifier in your room to make sure that the humidity is at 50% humidity. There's a million things I can give you. The problem is you are trying to get perfect sleep in an ecosystem that's not engineered for perfect sleep. Okay? So this is why your environment is so important. And when you start becoming mindful once again of your environment and engineering it towards a supporting growth and development towards your goals, everything starts moving in alignment. But I'll tell you something that's really fascinating piece of research that comes from Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. The Saint Patanjali speaks about 5 states of mind. Okay, the first 2 states of mind are Sipta and Muddha. Okay, these states of mind mean that you are a direct byproduct of your ecosystem. If I take you and put you in an environment, within time, hours, weeks, months, you will mimic that environment. So if I put you in a toxic environment, you'll start behaving like that. That state of mind is a person that's directly influenced by his environment. The third state of mind is a state of mind that many of us are in. It's called a Viksipta state of mind. That means that you're aware of the fact that I can cultivate my higher self, which means that if I'm stressed or I'm anxious or I'm nervous, if I sit down, if I do some chanting, some breath work, some meditation, then you know what? For that brief period in time, I'm no longer stressed. Maybe it'll last for 30 minutes, 1 hour, 2 hours after you stop meditating, but it's temporary. And then you'll come back to your environment molding you. The fourth state of mind is called Niruddha. Niruddha is where you can rise above the trappings of your environment and you can stay there for a prolonged period of time, which means days, months, weeks. A lot of yogis are in that space, using the meditation, their power. They rise above it. It's not troubling them. We see so many people now with COVID-19. You're seeing people who are directly impacted by everything that's happening. You're seeing people who are not impacted by it at all. It's not that they don't have problems. The problems exist. It's just that the problems are not their problems anymore. And then the fifth state of mind is a state called, the fourth state was Ekagra, the fifth state is Niruddha. Niruddha is where you become such an enlightened person that you start changing your environment around you. And we've seen this with people. You've seen some people walk into a room, right, and they dictate the energy of that room. I've met His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Radhanath Swami and all of these people. They do this, they walk into a room and the entire energy in the room molds according to them. Now, why am I saying this? I'm saying this because if you don't know what state of mind you're in, then you don't understand the impact your environment is having on you. When you understand what state of mind you're in, you'll be more conscious of engineering your environment. So when a Dalai Lama walks into a room, he doesn't have to care about what that room is like because his energy can mold it. But when I walk into a room, I have to care what room is because that environment is molding me. So your environment is every single thing. You are a byproduct of your environment. It's called ontological conditioning.
Right. Makes sense. Yeah, and I think it's I mean, this comes to the next point, which you've spent a lot of time in Buddhist monasteries in Japan, learned the art of pranayam, and which is breath work, from traditional yogis in the Himalayas, lived life as a monk. I mean, do you feel it's important to start the spiritual journey at an early stage to master that, this mindfulness that we've been talking about?
Absolutely. I feel that, the earlier you start the journey, the better it's going to serve you. Remember, Gauri, you cannot cultivate the skill at the time when you need it. Sure. It doesn't work like that.
It's a conditioning from the ground up.
Repetitive conditioning over and over. Yeah. So right now, the people, and I've noticed this around me, I've got hundreds of clients and athletes around the world, and I've noticed that those who've been cultivating a deep spiritual practice, people who have been meditating for a long time, doing their breath work, doing their chanting, doing their gratitude journaling, those are the people that are perfectly fine right now, right? The others have started the practice and they're getting better month by month, right? But they're nowhere close to what those are who've been practicing this for a prolonged period of time. So it's very important for you to make one of these habits, these spiritual practices, a part of your life every single day. Because the truth is that you don't know when you're going to be thrown a variable from the outside world. And when you are thrown it, you are not going to be in the state of mind to then start learning a new practice and using it. You need to cultivate it. We are, any one of these habits is incremental gains, which means every day that you do it is every day that it adds up until a point when you can leverage what you've got in your bank. Yeah.
Yeah. Like any skill, I guess. I mean, it's something that you need to keep working on, and then be able to sort of use it when you need it. And I think it's, I have a 7-year-old daughter, and I feel like it's something that I'm I'm more aware of now, that I feel like she should, it should be part of almost the education process for her, to become, to sort of be exposed to this kind of a skill, because it's clearly something that's, it drives our entire life, frankly. So can I ask you something? I mean, can you share an instance where you've experienced a major setback or failure, and how you personally coped with it?
I experienced a major setback and a failure not even 45 days ago. On the 14th of June, I was in Goa, and I wake up in the morning and I get the news that my friend and my business partner in my new business, his name is Samir Bangara. We've been very close. Samir was my very, very dear friend. I spoke to him 2 nights before that. I speak to him. He was my mentor. I used to mentor him. Found out that he passed away in a bike accident. Yeah. I get ready to drive back to Bombay, and I get back to Bombay on Tuesday. And Tuesday morning, I wake up to the news that my spiritual master has tested COVID positive, and he's on a ventilator. He passed away 7 days later. And then on the Wednesday after that, which was literally 80 hours after Sam passed away, I wake up in the morning and I learned that my father had a heart attack and he was in the ICU for what was, he got discharged 3 days ago, and he spent almost 48 days in ICU. So at a time when my entire stability base was ripped away from me, my spiritual master was someone who my entire spiritual grounding came from him. I traveled the world around him. I've been to almost 20 countries with him. Sam was my business CEO of my company, business partner, person who provided everything. I didn't take care of it. My father, I speak to him every day. He's like my best friend. And in literally in 3 days, I felt like my entire emotional stability base had been torn away from me. And what did I resort to? I rarely, by Thursday, Friday that week, I was scared to answer the phone. Because every time I answered the phone, I was so petrified that the news is going to be any worse and I wouldn't be able to deal with it. And then I resorted to the only thing that I know well, which is I take my chanting beads and I started chanting. I started chanting 5, 6, 7 hours a day, every single day. And then slowly I felt my energy rising. Slowly I've been able to actually have a conversation without breaking down and crying, without being this thing. And within a week of it, I was in a position to be able to not just communicate and function normally, I was in a position to help people around me who were also impacted by that. So I started doing counseling calls with everyone. I started speaking to my dad, my mom, everything. So I mean, we all are faced with this. That was the most recent incident. I mean, the furthest incident away from me is the impact of growing up in an apartheid environment where no matter how hard you work, it's never good enough. Everything you've been judged on by the color of your skin. And the problem is that, what I'm going through is probably a drop in the ocean. There are people who are probably going through a lot more as well. And these narratives will keep changing, which is why it's so important for you to understand what is going to be my go-to practice that helps me recenter my energy when everything around me is falling apart.
Yeah. And I mean, coming to your book, because I think that your book sort of conveys what seems like simple ideas, but it actually has a larger message. And, I mean, is this sort of like an amalgam of your years of study and practice? I mean, can you tell us a bit more about it?
Yeah, Breathe, Believe, Balance is really a coming together of all my work, all my experiences, life experiences, starting from the time I was at school and growing up in an apartheid environment, how the apartheid impacted me and why I chose to go into the ashram to understand and cultivate myself. Going into the ashram, understanding the importance of the mind and realizing that spirituality and psychology really can run deeper and more connected than I realized, which sent me down the line of really specializing in psychology and bringing together human physiology and neurobiology together. Okay. Then I speak a lot of my entrepreneurship journeys of leaving the temple, coming to India, starting a company, going to the Olympic Games, looking at the levels of discrimination that Indian athletes are facing on a global platform. That is just an atrocity of note when you look at how Indian athletes have to go and compete against the US and British and Russian athletes who are given everything, and we're not even given a decent plate of food. So the book is everything. But more than anything, the book addresses 3 of the major fights that an individual will go through in life. The first fight is early on after school in the 20s is the fight for your identity. When you're trying to let the world, you discover who you are and let the world know who you are so that you can be recognized by that. This is probably, Gauri, one of the biggest problems that plagues every single student, not just in this country, in the world. All of them are studying, whether they're medicine or engineers or doctors. They are struggling to identify, to be recognized, to be acknowledged, to find their place in it. Every single one of them is feeling lonely because that identity struggle is plaguing them. The problem is they're going to find themselves, and at 30, they may not even find themselves, but they may be in that process for so long that their ways are set. The second one then is the struggle becomes internal. Right. Internally is where, you believe that certain things were, the glass ceiling was set at a certain way. I want to set a business. The business is this. I want to travel here. I want to go there. And then you now try to shatter all of those beliefs that you had. You try to build a bigger business. You try to buy a better home, have a bigger car, have more money in your bank, try to do that. Everything that you thought was a limiting belief, you shatter that. So you spend the years between 30 to about 40, 45 trying to shatter those beliefs. When you get to about 50, you start thinking of now, okay, I've set up this business. I've made money. I've got a great family. The kids are gone to university. They're studying at Harvard and Stanford and Yale and engineering and this and everyone. So now what do I do with my life? I need to make the world a better place. I need to use my money. I need to use my knowledge. I need to do that. That's the third battle, the battle of transcendence. How do I establish a legacy in the world? Okay. And this book gives you the process for everything. For the internal battle of identity, the external battle of identity, the internal battle of shattering those glass ceilings, and then the battle of transcendence after that. And I break this down through processes of discovering yourself, how to fall in love with yourself, how to deepen your emotional how to understand your subconscious programs from inner childhood, how to communicate more mindfully, how to decode your strengths and use it in the world, how to identify your purpose and how to give back into the world, how to engineer your environment and goes on. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it's definitely something we could all do with right now. So Shayamal, this kind of brings us, to the sort of final sort of section of our podcast. And this is kind of the more fun, the light bit where you have to say the first thing that comes to your mind.
Okay.
What's your comfort food? Something that you can eat every day?
I was going to say pizza, but it has to be dal and rice. I get tired of pizza after a while.
You're not the first one to say that. What's the best book you've read this year, other than your own, of course?
Other than my own, the best book this year, I liked Fooled by Randomness, and I'm reading a book called Uddhava Gita, which is a sequel to the Gita.
Oh, wow, interesting. Who've been your role models or mentors?
My role models have always been my spiritual master, Bhakti Charaswami, then Radhanath Swami, then my old coach, Phil Russell, and obviously my father has been a very, very inspirational mentor for me.
Okay. What are you more passionate about, cricket or tennis?
Playing tennis, watching cricket.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what's your definition of success?
Success for me is the number of people's lives that I can impact positively.
Wonderful. Well, I know that I'm going to be coming away from this with a lot to think about, and it's been a hugely enriching conversation for me. And thank you so much for being present here today and having this chat. And I'm really looking forward to reading the book. And good luck with everything going forward. And I hope your father recovers soon too.
Thank you very, very much, Gauri. This was a really lovely conversation, and I'm honored that you invited me on to your podcast. Thank you.
No, absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
So the fact is that anxiety-inducing situations aren't really going anywhere, and it's really a matter of learning how to deal with them. And from what Shayamal's saying, it's actually all about the chemical makeup of our brains. So what we eat and how we exercise and how we breathe affects the level of stress and anxiety that we feel. So the next time you're at a restaurant, just remember to breathe better and chew better.
I hope you enjoyed that show. I'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Intel, for supporting us. First, right off the bat, want to congratulate Ashton Doctor on celebrating the 300th episode of The Habit Coach. It's a great show. If you haven't been listening to it, listen to it now. And if you listen to it, you can almost go for an entire year with an episode a day. It's really fun. Do definitely check that out. Arjun Koladi, the head of sales for Spotify in India, was on Advertising is Dead. Do check that out. Really fun show. On Cyrus Says, we had Samit Basu, the author, fantasy author, one of my favorites. Definitely do check that out. It's a Memorial Week this week on the IVM network. He was on Cyrus Says Cock and Bull on Thursday. He was on Litnama and, of course, his own podcast, Postcards from Nowhere. Do check that out. And one last note before we go. IVM Likes is back, and we've been doing a bunch of interesting conversations about different pop culture things that you might want to check out during the pandemic. Do give it a listen. I'm sure you'll enjoy that. And with that, I hope to see you again next week.
How many times have you motivated yourself to improve your sleep, or lose weight, or be more productive? How many times have you failed? Hi, my name is Ashton Doctor. Tune into my show, The Habit Coach Podcast, where we focus on creating small, tiny habits to improve your life instead of those big, impossible tasks. So make listening to me a habit every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on the IVM Podcast app or ivmpodcast.com or on your favorite podcasting app.